On Sunday last at Richard's, an allegory was retold that allows us to revisit those significant points in our spiritual journey and make a summation with the possibility that we can recognize where we've arrived at, where we are now. So in its retelling now, let's see, for those who have heard it before, what has arisen as an awareness of those significant points, or what it brings up for those of us who have not heard it. It's the story of that great king who had come to the end of his life, and he had an only son called Attila, who was the heir to his throne. But this great king called his most trusted advisors to him and asked them, "What tests should I give my son to prove his worthiness to take over the reign of this kingdom?" And one of the advisors said, "Send him on a quest to bring back to you the apple from the tree of life." And a second advisor said, "Tell him to bring you the ring of true happiness." And a third advisor said, "Let him go to the end of the earth, where lives King Mendoza, who has in his possession the mirror of truth." So the great king called his son Attila to him and told him of the tests that he had to fulfill to prove his worthiness to take over the kingdom. So that night, Prince Attila lay in his bed, tossing and turning in great agitation. He had never been outside the kingdom of his father. He tossed and turned and sweated. But then, suddenly, a great light, a great effulgent shining light appeared in his room and spoke to him and said, "Do not be afraid. I will guide you. The tasks that your father has set for you are not as daunting as you would imagine." And with that, the apparition handed to Prince Attila a talisman on a silver string. "Place this talisman around your neck, and when you have need, touch it 3 times, and what is needed will be there for you." So the next morning, Prince Attila climbed on his great stallion, wearing the chain with the talisman around his neck, and set out. Of course, the kingdom was vast, so it took many, many days for him to even reach the outer skirts of his father's kingdom. But passing through that invisible line which separated his kingdom from the rest of the world, Prince Attila passed, and before long he found himself at a great gate. Alighting from his horse, he opened the gate and entered a garden, an orchard filled with apple trees. But again, on his horse, he rode through the trees until he came to a tree on which he saw an apple bright and ripe in its redness. He picked that apple and carefully placed it in his robe. But just at that moment, a great swarm of flying, biting insects came and attacked him from all sides. He touched his talisman 3 times, and immediately the stings of the insects stung no more, and they disappeared. On his horse, he rode on and on and on. He needed not to touch his talisman, but the path seemed to be clear and direct, even though there were many adventures along the way. Until, at the end of a day, tired and thirsty, his horse also, he came to a stream, and as he was bending to drink from the clear stream, he saw 3 maidens come down to watch their clothing, and he asked them, "Where may I find a place of rest for the night?" And the maidens pointed to him the path to a farmhouse. So Prince Attila rode to the farmhouse, and when the door was opened by the old farmer, he sought hospitality, which was very freely given. He was welcomed by the hearth of their fire, given a repast. But after eating and some genial conversation, late in the evening there was a knock on the door. And when the farmer opened it, it was an old and ragged beggar. The farmer welcomed him in, gave him also a place by the fire and a bowl of soup to drink, and then gave him a blanket on which to lie to rest for the night. Prince Attila went into the room that had been designated for him and lay down to rest. But just as he was falling asleep, he heard cries of great pain and agony. Rising up to see, he found the old man in the throes of terrible pain. Kneeling beside him, not needing to touch his talisman, instinctively, unbidden, his hand went into his robe to take out the apple, and placing it to the lips of the old man, who took a bite and another, until the apple was gone. And before Prince Attila's very eyes, the old man was restored not only to health and an absence of pain, but restored to vibrant youth. he was overjoyed, and he said to Prince Attila, "Thank you for this great gift of regeneration. I have a gift in repayment for you." And the old man, now restored to youth, took from his garments a ring which had in it a stone, opalescent, glowing with an inner light. And he said, "This is the ring of true happiness. It is given you as reward and payment for the gift you have given me." Carefully, Prince Attila placed the ring in his robe. The next morning he took leave of the farmer, even though the farmer begged him to stay. The old man, now restored to youth, had gone off jauntily down the road. Prince Attila rode and rode and rode. The path was straight, but seemingly long, and filled again with adventures, until at last he came to a place where he knew this was the end of the world. But looking up on the high mountain, just before his eyes, there was a magnificent palace, glowing golden. So Prince Attila rode until he came to the gates of the palace, where he was greeted by the soldiers who guarded there. They barred his path. "What do you want?" they asked, and Prince Attila told them he wanted to meet King Mendoza and obtain from him the mirror of truth. Now, King Mendoza, having in his possession this mirror, knew of the prince's arrival and sent word to his guards to let him pass. When Prince Attila came into the presence of King Mendoza, he saw a man sad, abjectly sad, a head bowed in hopelessness. And when Prince Attila asked him, the king said, "Yes, look, I have this magnificent palace filled with gold and gems, but I am not happy." The Prince Attila took from his robe the ring and said to King Mendoza, "Place this on your finger." And when he did, King Mendoza jumped up with joy. "I've never felt such happiness and peace in my whole life. What can I give you in return?" Prince Attila said, "I would like the mirror of truth." "Take it, it's yours," said King Mendoza. Prince Attila took the mirror of truth, placing it carefully in his robes, and rode off The journey of returning to his home kingdom was in a trice, as though time had disappeared, and before long he was on the outskirts of the walls that surrounded his father's palace. But just as he was approaching, he saw smoke rising and flame. And when he turned a corner, there, confronting him, was a huge dragon with fire coming from its nostrils, streams of smoke rising into the sky. And in the dragon's mouth there was a maiden. Prince Attila touched his talisman 3 times and without hesitation drew out his sword and severed the head of the dragon. When the maiden came to give her thanks, beautiful she was, and smitten he was. And she said, "I am the daughter of a charcoal seller. Come with me on my horse," said Prince Attila, "and we will be wed." But when Prince Attila passed through the gate of the city, there was not a soul to be seen. The doors were closed and bolted. And without needing to touch his talisman, he knew that it was because the populace feared the dragon. So he shouted at the top of his voice, "Have no fear, the dragon has been slain. Come, come!" And the doors opened, and people flocked out and embraced him and raised him on their shoulders and took him triumphantly to his father's palace. The beautiful charcoal seller's daughter had been lost in the crowd, but he found her, and taking her hand, they went into the presence of the king. The king asked Prince Attila, "Have you brought me the apple from the tree of life, the ring of true happiness, the mirror of truth?" And Prince Attila told his father the whole story. "Ah," said the king, "you have brought a greater gift than any of these." Needless to say, Prince Attila wed his beautiful maiden, and they ruled over a kingdom peaceful and prosperous. An allegory of the spiritual journey. So the question was asked on Sunday, what is it that this apple from the tree of life represents? What is this ring of true happiness, this mirror of truth, and again allowing us to ask the question, what is the talisman? Because we know that when Prince Attila was united with his maiden and took over the kingdom, the talisman was no longer needed. In fact, it disappeared from around his neck. What are these significant points in our spiritual journey? For me, that apple of life came with what you might call that awakening, to coin that word, after a time of great despair, hopelessness, having an experience where it was realized that all was good, there was no evil. So it was the beginning of the quest, and yet there were many insects, stinging insects. And yet there was the talisman that made them disappear. And then the ring of true happiness for me was the moment when I realized it was God all along. It was God all along. And then the mirror of truth was when we realized that the Maya, the dance of life, the dance of life is what is unreal, and only that which is named God is real. But what about the dragon and the maiden in its mouth? What is it that we have to behead? What is it that we have to wed? For me, it was the realization that even though life is the dance of illusion, the play of light in existence, that it is to be lived. And to sever the head of that dragon was to sever that separation between the real and the unreal. To release, to wed, an awakening of the senses, which had been turned inward, 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 to be released, so that we become so alive that every cell dances with life. What are the milestones on your path? What are those significant points? Where are you now? Have you severed the head from the dragon? And feel and see, smell and taste the wonders of existence. But knowing and living in a state of absence of illusion that anything that changes and is transient is anything but the dance of existence. Again, emptiness here, emptiness there, emptiness everywhere. But the universe, the dance of existence, forever before our eyes, our senses. Life. Thank you.